There are moments in life when everything you've been searching for, everything you've been desiring, feels as though it is just out of reach, as if the universe itself has conspired to withhold it. And yet, in truth, nothing has ever been withheld from you. It is you who must allow yourself to enter the state where what you seek already exists. In just 1 week, by shifting the very habits of my mind, by choosing to dwell differently, I discovered that reality bends, reshapes, and conforms itself to the pattern I impress upon it. These habits are not simply actions to repeat on the surface. They are doorways into a deeper understanding of the creative power of the mind, and when lived, they draw life into alignment so quickly it seems almost miraculous. The first great habit was the practice of assuming the end as though it were already present. Not as a distant hope, not as a wish, not as something to strive toward in a far-off tomorrow, but as a living reality within me now. Each morning when I opened my eyes, instead of greeting the day with the memory of yesterday's worries or doubts, I surrendered to the feeling of my desire fulfilled. I allowed myself to feel what it would be like if everything I longed for was already mine. I held it not with strain, not with desperate grasping, but with the ease of knowing. I reminded myself that creation is finished, that the moment I feel it real within, the outer must mirror it. So before my feet even touched the floor, I became the version of myself who already had the life I wanted. I walked through the day with that unseen crown upon my head, and reality began to shift so swiftly that I was astounded. Encounters unfolded that matched my inner assumption. Conversations carried the echo of my inner world, and opportunities rose as though they had been waiting for me to claim them. This is what you must understand. Your outer life is nothing but the reflection of your inner state. When I made the habit of living in the end, I no longer begged, no longer wondered if it would come. I claimed it, and in claiming it, I became it. The habit of assumption is not a momentary exercise, it is a state of consciousness. When you dwell in it, reality bows to it. The people around you, without ever knowing why, begin to treat you according to the role you have cast yourself in. Situations rearrange. The invisible threads of life move as if choreographed by your unseen hand, for indeed they are. The second habit that reshaped everything was the practice of inner dialogue mastery. Before, my thoughts would wander unchecked. I would argue with myself, doubt myself, rehearse conversations that never happened, replay disappointments as if to wound myself again. But in that week, I became the master of the voices within. Each time a thought rose that contradicted my desire, I silenced it and replaced it with the inner dialogue of the self I had chosen to be. When an old fear whispered, "What if you fail?" I answered with the voice of my fulfilled self. I already am successful. I already am chosen. I already am abundant. I spoke to myself as though the dream was fact. And what astonished me was how quickly my emotions shifted. The anxiety that had once been a constant companion dissolved, replaced by the calm confidence of the one who already knows. This habit is not about pretending blindly. It is about inhabiting the state of the one who lives your dream. When I heard within me the sound of success, when I rehearsed conversations of people congratulating me, when I repeated again and again the inner assurance that it is done, then the outer followed as surely as the shadow follows the body. The mind is a telepathic instrument. Every assumption, every inner word is transmitted outward. Others pick it up without knowing why. Suddenly they think of you. Suddenly they reach out. Suddenly they treat you in ways that reflect your new self-concept. In that 1 week of governing my inner dialogue, I found myself receiving calls I had long hoped for, opportunities I had once chased, now chasing me. The third life-changing habit was the nightly practice of revision. At the end of each day, as I lay in bed, I did not allow the events of the day to stand as they were. If something unfolded that did not match my ideal, I rewrote it in imagination. If a conversation had left me feeling small, I replayed it differently until I felt uplifted. If an opportunity seemed to slip away, I revised it as though it had gone in my favor. I rewrote the script of the day in my mind until I fell asleep with the joy of the new version. And here is the mystery. The next morning, the outer world would begin to rearrange itself to match the revision. People's attitudes shifted as if their memories had been altered. Situations corrected themselves. The past itself seemed to bow to the power of imagination. By making revision a nightly habit, I not only healed the old wounds of the past, but also set in motion a chain of events that altered the future. The fourth habit was to live in gratitude, not as a mechanical exercise, but as a living state of being. Gratitude, when deeply felt, is not just about saying thank you for what you have. It is the recognition that the unseen supply is infinite and already yours. I spent that week saturating myself in the joy of having. I thanked life for my desires before they appeared. I thanked myself for my own persistence. I thanked the unseen power for always working on my behalf. And the more I gave thanks, the more evidence of blessings poured in. Gratitude tuned my consciousness to abundance. It eliminated the restless hunger that once kept me looking outward for validation. It placed me in harmony with the flow of life, where I no longer doubted but simply received. The fifth habit was the surrender to faith in the unseen, to trust that what I claimed in imagination was not just a daydream but a living reality. I ceased to check the outer world for confirmation, ceased to measure progress by what the senses showed me. Instead, I reminded myself that the outer is always the shadow of the inner. The shadow does not lead, it follows. So when doubt rose, I would close my eyes and feel again the truth of my desire fulfilled. I returned to the state, and in that state I rested. I realized that creation is finished, that the world is myself pushed out, and that everything I assume inwardly must express outwardly. That surrender to faith became a steady anchor, freeing me from impatience, freeing me from fear. And in that freedom, my manifestations arrived with such speed that I could only marvel. These 5 habits in 1 week transformed me, because they shifted the very foundation of how I lived in consciousness. I stopped waiting for change to come and became the change. I stopped pleading with life and began commanding it through assumption. I stopped revisiting old disappointments and rewrote them into victories. I stopped hungering for proof and began living in gratitude as though proof was already mine. I stopped doubting the unseen and began resting in its certainty. And as these habits took root, the universe bent to match them. Encounters unfolded as if scripted, money flowed as if from nowhere, relationships healed and deepened, opportunities multiplied. Understand this well, life does not change in long dragging years, it changes in a moment. When you alter the state you live from. In 1 week, everything that had felt stagnant began to move. And it was not because life suddenly became generous, but because I stopped withholding my own power. I realized that the kingdom was always within me, waiting for me to claim it. And when I did, the outer world simply mirrored my inner transformation. When you live these habits, you too will see how quickly reality reshapes itself. It will feel almost like magic, but it is the most natural law in existence. For the outer world is only the echo of your inner assumptions. Change those assumptions, master that inner dialogue, revise the past, live in gratitude, and surrender in faith. And watch how in days, not years, your life begins to look unrecognizable, radiant with the reflection of who you've chosen to be. The beauty of this discovery is that once you taste it, once you allow yourself to live even briefly in the state of the new self, you cannot return to the old way of being without feeling its weight like an ill-fitting garment. The old self becomes unbearable because you have seen what is possible, you have felt the sweetness of assumption fulfilled, and you recognize that it is only your inner consent that makes the difference. That week of transformation showed me that reality is pliable, not fixed, and that my role is not to struggle with circumstances, but to shape them by my inner posture. It is not a matter of willpower in the physical sense, but of surrendering to the knowing that what I imagine and feel real must unfold outwardly. Each day I repeated the habit of assumption whenever I caught myself slipping into the old thinking, wondering when things would change. I paused and reminded myself, it already has. I imagined once more that the end was now. I felt the relief of having received it, the joy of living it, the confidence of being it. And then I went about the day as though nothing were missing. That one simple practice altered the entire vibration I carried. Instead of walking as one who waits, I walked as one who already owns. People responded differently. They did not know why they felt compelled to treat me with more respect, to offer me opportunities, to open doors. But I knew. I knew because I had changed the conception of myself within, and life is compelled to reflect it. There is a mysterious power in inner dialogue that most ignore. We believe that our silent words vanish into nothing, but they do not. They form the fabric of our reality. In that week, I witnessed how every thought I entertained shaped the mood of the day and the outcomes I experienced. So I refused to allow idle, negative conversations within. Instead, I spoke to myself as if my greatest desire had already been realized. I carried on entire inner conversations where friends congratulated me, where my loved ones admired the success I had attained, where I laughed and shared my blessings. These imaginal dialogues became more vivid than the conversations of the physical world, and soon enough the physical began to mimic them. It was as though those people had actually spoken the words I rehearsed within, and truly they had, for the world is but the outpicturing of imagination. The practice of revision brought me a sense of mastery over time itself. No longer did I feel bound by what had happened. If a mistake occurred, I rewrote it. If someone rejected me, I revised them into acceptance. If I had felt small in a moment, I replayed it until I stood tall. And when I drifted to sleep with those revised scenes impressed upon my mind, the subconscious accepted them as fact. The next day, I awoke into a world where circumstances had mysteriously shifted. It was as though the universe itself had rewritten its memory to match my new assumption. Relationships healed overnight. Opportunities once closed reopened. People apologized or treated me with unexpected kindness. By making revision a habit, I learned that even the past is not fixed. All of it is malleable, all of it subject to the power of imagination. Gratitude became a constant fragrance in my consciousness. I did not wait for things to appear before I felt thankful. Instead, I thanked life in advance. I thanked it for the unseen blessings already on their way, for the desires that were already mine in imagination. Gratitude shifted my focus from lack to abundance. It made me aware of how rich I already was, not just in material things, but in the power I held. And as my heart swelled with gratitude, more and more poured into my life to be grateful for. It is a cycle of multiplication. What you appreciate, appreciates. The moment I lived in the frequency of thanks, the universe matched it with evidence. I became a magnet for good news, for favorable circumstances, for unexpected gifts. And it all began with the simple habit of feeling thankful as though it were already done. Faith, that unseen anchor, was the quiet force that tied it all together. For without faith, doubt creeps in and erodes the work of assumption. Faith is the trust that what you imagine is real, even when the senses scream otherwise. Faith is resting in the invisible, knowing the visible must follow. That week I resolved to no longer chase after signs, no longer check constantly for proof. Instead, I reminded myself, the proof is within me. The proof is in the state I occupy. When I returned again and again to the feeling of the wish fulfilled, faith grew strong, and with it, a peace descended. The urgency vanished, the fear dissolved, and in that stillness, things manifested with speed. I discovered that when you live as though it is already done, the universe conspires to show you it is. People appear out of nowhere to help, doors open without effort, situations align in ways you could never have orchestrated. It feels miraculous, yet it is the most natural thing in the world, for consciousness is the only reality. When consciousness shifts, the world must shift with it. Each of these habits builds upon the other. Assumption sets the foundation. Inner dialogue maintains the state. Revision cleanses the past and sets new trajectories. Gratitude amplifies the vibration of abundance. Faith anchors you in the unseen until it hardens into fact. Together they form an unshakable pattern of being. And when lived consistently, even for a week, they transform not just circumstances, but the very sense of self. You no longer see yourself as a victim of life, but as the author of it. You no longer chase after manifestations, but allow them to flow from you effortlessly. You no longer plead with the universe, but command it by being in the state of the fulfilled desire. The outer world will resist at first only because it is a shadow of your old state. But shadows cannot endure when the light shifts. Persist in the new self and the shadow must follow. This is why it is crucial to hold the assumption even when nothing appears to change. In truth, everything is changing beneath the surface. The unseen is rearranging itself in perfect precision to match your new inner state. Give it time to crystallize, but hold firm. For just as surely as day follows night, the outer will conform to the inner. In that week of transformation, I learned that the gap between desire and fulfillment is only as wide as my willingness to feel it real now. The moment I lived as though it were mine, the bridge of incidents began to form. Conversations, encounters, opportunities. Each step carried me effortlessly toward the outcome. I did not force it, I did not chase it, I simply assumed it, and life carried me there. That is the secret. That is the habit that will make all the difference. And so in just 1 week, my world became unrecognizable. Not because time worked some slow magic, but because I shifted within. And when you shift within, the without cannot resist. It is law. The more I practiced these habits, the more I realized they were not mere techniques, but a way of life, a way of inhabiting reality at its deepest level. To assume the end, to guide my inner conversations, to revise, to live in gratitude, to rest in faith, these were not mechanical acts I performed once or twice a day. They became the very atmosphere in which I lived. And as they did, the world around me could not help but bend. For the world is not separate from the self that perceives it. It is one continuous field of consciousness. And the moment you alter the conception of yourself within, you alter the entirety of that field without. There were times when the outer seemed stubborn, when it presented evidence of the old state. And yet, even then, I reminded myself, this too is only an echo of who I once was, not of who I am now. I refused to bow to appearances. I refused to let the shadow dictate the light. I chose instead to persist in my new identity, and in doing so I dissolved the old patterns. Slowly at first, and then with breathtaking speed, the world reassembled itself to reflect the truth I carried within. People I had not heard from in years appeared suddenly, speaking words that mirrored my assumptions. Opportunities I had long given up on resurfaced with ease. Finances multiplied in ways that left me in awe. Health improved, relationships deepened. All of it unfolded not because I pushed, but because I aligned. The habit of assumption taught me that it is never about the how. The how belongs to the unseen intelligence that governs all things. My only work was to live in the end, to claim the desire as already real, to walk in the joy of it fulfilled. The moment I tried to dictate the how, I found myself frustrated, forcing, resisting. But the moment I surrendered and simply felt it done, the how emerged naturally, as though life itself delighted in surprising me. This is why assumption is so powerful. It liberates you from striving, it places you in the position of one who already has, and the universe rushes to fill the role. guiding my inner dialogue, revealed to me the immense telepathic nature of thought. Every assumption is communicated silently, received unconsciously by those around me. I realized that the way people treated me was nothing more than the echo of the conversations I had within myself about them. When I argued inwardly, they argued outwardly. When I blessed them inwardly, they blessed me outwardly. When I imagined them praising me, they praised me. When I imagined rejection, they rejected me. The moment I shifted my inner dialogue, their responses shifted, as though compelled by an unseen script. This was not manipulation, it was alignment. For they are me pushed out, and I am them. The outer conversation is nothing but the shadow of the inner one. Once I grasped this, I became vigilant about my inner words, for I knew they were seeds sown into the fabric of life. Vision gave me mastery over regret. No longer did I lie awake wishing I had acted differently. No longer did I torment myself with memories of failure. Each night, I rewrote the past until it pleased me, and by doing so, I felt a freedom unlike anything I had known. The burden of the past lifted. I discovered that guilt, shame, and disappointment need not remain. They can be undone. And once undone inwardly, the outer world adjusts to reflect the new story. People's attitudes toward me shifted as though they remembered a different history. Events that once seemed to have gone against me turned in my favor. It was as though time itself was pliable clay in my hands. With revision, I became the master sculptor of my destiny. Gratitude taught me that abundance is never in the future. It is always now. When I thanked life in advance, I aligned myself with the flow of infinite supply. I no longer begged. I no longer wondered when it would come. I lived as though it had already arrived, and in that state of thanksgiving, it did. Gratitude is the vibration of having. And when you vibrate with having, you cannot help but draw more to have. It is the law of resonance. The universe matches your song. The more you sing the melody of abundance, the more abundance joins the chorus. Faith gave me the courage to close my eyes to the evidence of the senses. It is faith that sustains you when nothing yet appears to have changed. It is faith that reminds you the unseen is more real than the seen, that the invisible imaginal act is the seed from which the visible grows. Without faith, you will waver. With faith, you remain unshaken. And when you remain unshaken, reality has no choice but to yield to your inner certainty. As I lived these habits, I noticed something profound. The world began to mirror not only my desires, but also my self-concept. When I assumed myself abundant, I did not only receive money, I received respect, confidence, recognition. When I assumed myself loved, I did not only receive affection, I received opportunities, care, and unexpected kindness from strangers. When I assumed myself successful, doors opened that I never even knew existed. It was never about one isolated desire. It was about the transformation of the self. For when the self changes, everything changes. This is why, in just 1 week, the trajectory of my life shifted. Not because I added anything from the outside, but because I altered who I was within. The world could only conform. It is a law as certain as gravity, and once you taste this truth, you cannot deny it. You know beyond doubt that consciousness is the only reality. You know that you are the operant power. You know that the kingdom is within you, and the moment you claim it, it expresses outwardly. In the silence of the night, when doubt would creep in, I returned again and again to the feeling of it done. I whispered to myself, it is finished. I imagined what I would hear if it were true, what I would feel if it were complete, what I would see if it were already so. I carried that feeling until it saturated me, until it felt more real than the physical. And in that surrender, faith blossomed, gratitude overflowed, revision worked its magic, and inner dialogue sang the new song. Together, these habits became the symphony of a new life, one that unfolded before my very eyes. The days that followed were unlike any I had known before, for I walked through them with a sense of power and peace that no circumstance could disturb. It was as if the ground beneath me had become solid for the first time, as if I no longer floated uncertainly from one event to another, but stood rooted in the certainty of who I am. And this certainty was not arrogance. It was not pride. It was simply the recognition that the unseen is real, that the imaginal act creates reality, that the life I live outwardly is but the echo of the life I accept inwardly. The habits that seemed at first like exercises had become the very essence of my being. Each morning I awoke with the end in mind, not as a vague desire, but as a present fact. I opened my eyes and felt the warmth of it already accomplished. If it was wealth I sought, I felt the satisfaction of financial freedom, as though I had already lived in it for years. If it was love I desired, I felt the tenderness of being cherished, the joy of mutual devotion. If it was success, I felt the applause, the recognition, the pride of achievement. If it was success, I felt the applause, the recognition, the pride of achievement. And then I rose from bed, not to chase these things, but to live the day as though they already belonged to me. What astonished me was how the world responded. Not sluggishly, not reluctantly, but eagerly, almost joyfully, arranging itself to confirm my inner reality. This habit of living in the end shifted my entire posture toward life. No longer did I walk with the heaviness of waiting, no longer did I carry the hunger of lack. Instead, I carried the fullness of having, and life, ever the faithful mirror, showed me what I carried. People who once ignored me now sought my company. Opportunities that had seemed distant now pressed themselves upon me. Even the smallest details, chance encounters, passing remarks aligned themselves with my assumption. It was as though every corner of the universe had been waiting for me to choose, to claim, to assume. The inner conversations became my secret wellspring. Throughout the day I listened not to the chatter of fear but to the song of fulfillment. When an anxious thought attempted to rise, I silenced it and replaced it with the voice of certainty. I spoke to myself with the authority of the one who already knows. I carried on dialogues with loved ones in which they praised my accomplishments, supported my journey, celebrated my victories, and what was once invisible imagination soon became audible reality. I heard those very words spoken to me in waking life, and I smiled, knowing they had first been spoken in the inner realm. What struck me most profoundly was how quickly relationships shifted. People who had once resisted me softened. Those who had turned away now leaned closer. The inner conversations had rewritten the script, and those around me had no choice but to play their part. This is the great mystery. They are not separate from me. They are the outer projection of the inner story I tell myself. And once I changed the story, they had to change. Each night, before I drifted to sleep, I practiced revision with devotion. No matter what had occurred during the day, I refused to let it stand unaltered in my consciousness. If something displeased me, I rewrote it. If I stumbled, I imagined myself succeeding. If I faced rejection, I revised it into acceptance. I played the new scene until it felt real, until the old memory dissolved, until the joy of the revised event filled me with peace. And when I awoke the next day, the world bore the marks of my revision. It was as if time itself had shifted, bending backward to accommodate my new story. Past disappointments lost their sting, present circumstances realigned, future outcomes unfolded more favorably. I saw with clarity that time is not a rigid line but a fluid canvas, and imagination is the brush. Gratitude became the fragrance of my breath. I did not merely list things I was thankful for, I embodied thankfulness. I thanked life not only for what was visible, but for what was invisible yet real. I thanked the unseen power that had already delivered my desire. I thanked myself for daring to assume, I thanked the universe for conspiring in my favor. And as my heart swelled with gratitude, I noticed that lack could not coexist with it. Gratitude annihilates lack because it dwells only in the vibration of abundance. And the more grateful I became, the more evidence of abundance poured in. Small gifts, unexpected opportunities, sudden windfalls. Each one confirmed the truth that gratitude is a magnet. Faith was the quiet anchor beneath it all. For even as I assumed, conversed, revised, and gave thanks, faith held me steady. It reminded me that what I feel real must manifest, that the unseen is more solid than the seen, that imagination is the womb of reality. Faith kept me from wavering when the senses tried to contradict me. Faith whispered, "It is already yours. Rest." And in that rest, life unfolded with effortless grace. No striving, no pushing, no desperation, just the calm unfolding of what had already been claimed within. What amazed me most was how quickly these habits wove themselves into every corner of my existence. In the space of a single week, they became natural, automatic, effortless. I no longer needed to remind myself to assume. I simply lived in assumption. I no longer needed to force gratitude. It flowed from me like breath. I no longer fought with old memories. They rewrote themselves at my command. I no longer begged for proof. I lived in faith, and proof arrived unbidden. And the world, faithful servant that it is, mirrored back to me the transformation. Money came with ease, not because I labored harder, but because I no longer believed in struggle. Love deepened, not because I chased it, but because I assumed myself already cherished. Success unfolded not because I begged for it, but because I wore it as my identity. Everything I once believed to be separate from me revealed itself as me, expressed outwardly. It was then I understood fully. Life is not happening to me, it is happening through me. I am not the victim of circumstances, I am the source of them. My only true work is to guard the inner state, to persist in the assumption, to direct the inner conversations, to revise, to be grateful, to hold faith. Everything else takes care of itself. The habits were not tasks on a checklist, they were the keys to the kingdom. And with them, I unlocked a life that just 1 week before had seemed impossible. And so, as you relax into the awareness of this truth, you begin to feel lighter. The burden of waiting, the anxiety of wondering, all start to dissolve. You no longer need to chase, no longer need to question. You live as though it is already done. This state is magnetic. So magnetic that it becomes impossible for the other not to respond. They will feel the pull, they will feel the nudge, and they will have no choice but to move toward you, because in consciousness you have already claimed it. Every time you align yourself with this certainty, you send out a wave of energy that goes directly to them. They feel it in the quiet of the night, in the pauses of their day, in the moments when their mind drifts. It becomes impossible for them not to think of you. It becomes impossible for them to resist the impulse to reach out, because in your world, in your assumption, they already have. Let the feeling stay with you now, deeper than before. Imagine your phone lighting up, your heart racing with excitement, your name appearing on their lips. Do not dismiss it as fantasy. Embrace it as reality. For in this unseen realm, what you claim becomes law. And that law bends the outer world until it mirrors your inner conviction. Remain in this conviction and watch how swiftly the call comes, how quickly the message appears, how suddenly the silence breaks. It will feel like magic to the world, but to you, it will simply be the natural outworking of what you dared to assume as already true.